Hey friends, just wanted to pick up where we left off with Number the Stars. Hopefully you guys get your chapter 10 work turned in. We're going to continue and just do chapter 11 today. So, looking back, I kind of like to take a look at the previous assignments before reading on, which we well know. Okay, looks like a bunch of stuff for me to grade there. All right, vocabulary, staccato. Staccato is anything like with a quick, sharp beat, like rat-a-tat-tat-ter. I think we talked about it was the staccato of the officer's boots. I hope you can hear that. Condescending is looking down on someone or kind of like thinking you're better than they are or they're worse than you. Typhus is a very fearful disease. All right, so now off to our key details. Why did the German soldiers come to Uncle Henrik's house? There was a gathering of people, and that was suspicious. What was the first test of Anne Marie's bravery? That is when the soldier snapped at her and asked her, who died? And finally, how does Mrs. Johansson stop the Germans from looking in the casket? She mentions that Great Aunt Beate has a terrible, terrible case of typhus that can possibly be contagious. And it works. We talked about number 7, Peter reading from the Bible. Makes it more convincing that they're having a Christian funeral and not harboring a bunch of Jewish folks. And then why didn't Ellen smile? I guess I kind of think because Ellen didn't realize it was a fake funeral. And then for these last couple things, we actually read to the answer in number 10, 9, and 10. As long as your opinions are reasonable, we'll go with them. Okay? Let's see. I want to just preview the vocabulary words before we read today. So as we look at the work, we're going to do in chapter 11. Poopity boo, my computer is slow. It's encased on page 89, Godspeed on 93, and commotion on 93. So keep those in mind. All right, are we ready, Freddies? Let's do this. Chapter 11. Will we see you again soon, Peter? Anne-Marie blinked. Across the dark room, she saw Ellen too peering into the narrow wooden box in surprise. There was no one in the casket at all. Instead, it seemed to be stuffed with folded blankets and articles of clothing. Peter began to lift things out and distribute them to the silent people in the room. He handed heavy coats to the man and his wife, and another to the old man with the beard. It'll be very cold, he murmured. Put them on. He found a thick sweater for Mrs. Rosen and a woolen jacket for Ellen's father. After a moment of rummaging through the folded things, he found a smaller winter jacket and handed it to Ellen. Anne-Marie watched as Ellen took the jacket in her arms and looked at it. It was patched and worn. It was true there had been few new clothes for anyone during the recent years, but still, Ellen's mother had always managed to make clothes for her daughter, often using the old things that she was able to take apart and refashion in a way that made them seem brand new. Never had anything worn anything so shabby and old. But she put it on, pulled it around her, and buttoned the mismatched buttons. Peter, his arms full of the odd pieces of clothing, looked toward the silent couple with the infant. I'm sorry, he said to them. There's nothing for the baby. I'll find something, Mama said quickly. The baby must be warm. She left the room and was back in a moment with Kirsty's thick red sweater. Here, she said softly to the mother. It'll be much too big, but that'll make it even warmer for him. The woman then spoke for the first time. Her, she whispered. She's a girl. Her name is Rachel. Mama smiled and helped her direct the sleeping baby's arms into the sleeves of the sweater. Together they buttoned the heart-shaped buttons. Oh, how Kirsty loved that sweater with its heart buttons, until the tiny child was completely encased in warm red wool. Her eyelids fluttered, but she didn't wake. I had Charlie for a while today, and I'd carried him around, and he did move. He was out. Peter reached into his pocket and took something out. He went to the parents and leaned down toward the baby. He opened the lid of the small bottle in his hand. How much does she weigh? Peter asked. She was 7 pounds when she was born, the woman replied. She gained a little, but not very much. She's maybe 8 pounds now, no more. A few drops will be enough then. It has no taste. She won't even notice. The mother tightened her arms around the baby and looked up at Peter, pleading, please, no. She said, she always sleeps at night. Please, she doesn't need it. I promise she won't cry. Peter's voice was firm. We can't take a chance, he said. He inserted the dropper of the bottle into the baby's tiny mouth and squeezed a few drops of liquid onto her tongue. The baby yawned and swallowed, and the mother closed her eyes. The husband gripped her shoulder. So think about what might have been in that dropper to get the baby to sleep. We'll kind of circle back and we'll talk about that tomorrow. Next, Peter removed the folded blankets from the coffin one by one and handed them around. Carry these with you, he said. You'll need them later for warmth. Anne-Marie's mother moved around the room and gave each person a small package of food. The cheese and bread and apples Anne-Marie had helped prepare in the kitchen hours before. Finally, Peter took a paper wrap packet from the inside of his own jacket. He looked around the room at the assembled people now dressed in the bulky winter clothing, and then motioned to Mr. Rosen, who followed him into the hall. Anne-Marie could overhear their conversation. Mr. Rosen, Peter said, I must get this to Henrik, but I might not see him. I'm going to take the others only to the harbor, and they'll go out to the boat alone. I want you to deliver this. Without fail, it is of great importance. There was a moment's silence in the hall, and Anne-Marie knew that Peter must be giving the packet to Mr. Rosen. Anne-Marie could see it protruding, oh, that's a great vocabulary word, from Mr. Rosen's pocket when he returned to the room and sat down again. She could see, too, that Mr. Rosen had a puzzled look. He didn't know what the packet contained. He hadn't asked. It was one more time Anne-Marie realized when they protected one another by not telling. If Mr. Rosen knew, he might be frightened. If Mr. Rosen knew, he might be in more danger. So he hadn't asked, and Peter hadn't explained. And now, Peter said, looking at his watch, I will lead the first group. You and you and you. He gestured to the old man and the young people with their baby. Inga, he said. Anne-Marie realized this is the first time he heard Peter Nielsen call her mother by her first name. Before, it had always been Mrs. Johansson, or in the old days, during the merriment and excitement of his engagement to Lisa, it had occasionally been Mama. Oh, but now it was Inga. It was as if he had moved beyond his own youth and had taken his place in the world of adults. Her mother nodded and waited for his instructions. You wait 20 minutes and then bring the Rosens. Don't come sooner. We must be separate on the path so there is less chance of being seen. Mrs. Johansson nodded again. Come directly back to the house after you've seen the Rosens safely to Henrik. Stay in the shadows and on the back path. You know that, of course. By the time you get the Rosens to the boat, Peter went on, I will be gone. As soon as I deliver my group, I must move on. There is other work to be done tonight. Then he turned to Anne-Marie. So I will say goodbye to you now. Anne-Marie went to him and gave him a hug. But will we see you again soon? She asked. I hope so, Peter said, very soon. Don't grow much more. You'll be taller than I am, little long legs. Anne-Marie smiled, but Peter's comment was no longer the light-hearted fun of the past. It was only a brief grasp at something that had gone. Peter kissed Mama wordlessly, and then he wished the Rosens Godspeed, vocab, and he led the others through the door. Mama, Anne-Marie, and the Rosens sat in silence. There was a slight commotion outside the door, and Mama went quickly to look out. In a moment, she was back. Oh, it's all right, she said in response to their looks. The old man stumbled. Peter helped him up. He didn't seem to be hurt. Maybe just his pride, she added, smiling a bit. This is an odd word. Pride. Anne-Marie looked at the Rosens sitting there, wearing the ill-fitting, misshapen clothing, holding ragged blankets folded in their arms, their faces drawn and tired. She remembered the earlier, happier times. Mrs. Rosen, her hair neatly combed and covered, lighting the Sabbath candles, saying the ancient prayer, and Mr. Rosen, sitting in the big chair in their living room, studying his thick books, correcting papers, adjusting his glasses, looking up now and then to complain good-naturedly about the lack of decent light. She remembered Ellen in the school play, moving confidently across the stage, her gestures sure, her voice clear. All of those things, those sources of pride, the candlesticks, the books, the daydreams of theater, had been left behind in Copenhagen. They had nothing with them now. There was only the clothing of unknown people for warmth and the food from Henrik's farm for survival, and the dark path ahead, through the woods, to freedom. Anne-Marie realized, much like all of you did, though she had not really been told, that Uncle Henrik is going to take them in his boat across the sea to Sweden. She knew how frightened Mrs. Rosen was of the sea, its width, its depth, its cold. She knew how frightened Ellen was of the soldiers, with their guns and boots, who were certainly looking for them. And she knew how frightened they all must be of the future. But their shoulders were as straight as they had been in the past, in the classroom, on the stage, and at the Sabbath table. So there were other sources, too, of pride. And they had not left everything behind. Because they still had pride. All right. That was a good one today. Very somber, serious stuff going on here. So, as always, I'd suggest you go back and give it a reread to make sure you didn't miss anything. If there's anything else you want to just clarify or chew on a bit. When that's done, you can do your assigned activity for today. After that, IXL diagnostics, get them up to date, and then whatever's left you can use for IDR, work time, typing club, PAL, whatever. And that's about it. Okay, I'm ready to go night-night. I hope to see you guys on Thursday. Bye.